thought of creating I thought of creating a small video tutorial where I kind of give hints as to how to work on the practice problem sheet, right? Okay, so but make sure that you not only review this, but you manage to review homework and quiz problems because the test one can cover literally everything that we did from the beginning of the semester until the test. Okay. All right. So So I want you to first look at questions 1 through 7, right? Okay. So 1 through 7, right, are all about finding solving equations, right? Okay. So what you do is, right? Okay, you when you do a problem like this, right? So let's look at the first problem, right? So first problem has a denominator, right? Okay. So you can tell the LCD, right, of these denominators of 2 and 6, right, and then that will be 6, right. If you don't want to take the LCD, you can just even take the multiple, which is 12. That's fine too, right. And then you multiply the entire equation by 6, so you have 3x over 2 times 6 minus x over 6 times 6 equals 8 times 6. And when you do that, you will notice that some of these things will disappear. All the denominators will disappear. 2 times 3, 6 will go off altogether, and then you will not have any denominators. You will just have a linear equation which you can solve. So I want you to go ahead and do that, right? So that's that. Here there is no denominator. What you do is you distribute the 5 and the negative 2, and then you get all the x's onto the left side, and the numbers onto the right side, or the other way around, it doesn't matter, and then you isolate your x and you solve it. Okay, so number 3 is pretty much like the first problem, except that now you have x minus 2 and x minus 2 and 5. So the LCD, or you can take the product, and that is 5 times x minus 2. That will be the LCD, right? And then once again, just like you did here, you multiply with every term of this equation by 5 times x minus 2, and the third terms will cancel off. Now the thing to remember in these rational equations is that you must always check the answer, right? Okay, check the answer. That's very important. Okay. And so 5 4 so I'll make it for 4 is pretty much like 2, and then again 5 is a rational equation, again the same thing, find the LCD, multiply 6 is like that, again find the LCD and multiply, and 7 is also find the LCD here and multiply. Okay, number 8 is kind of different. You want to find the x-intercept. So if you want to find the x-intercept, you want to set y to 0 and solve for x. If you want to find the y-intercept, you set x to 0 and solve for x. Now here in this problem, you are given the equation of the circle, and then you want to find the center and the radius. So what you do is you remember this is an equation that you need to memorize, right? Okay, and no notes are allowed, no calculators are allowed for the exam. So please do these problems without calculators, okay? All right, so just to get the training, right? And so you need to compare with this, and when you compare with this, you can see that the 1/2 is like h. So h and k are the center, right? So if you know that, so from when you identify your h and k, you can find out what the center is, and if you identify r, you can find out what the rate. You actually identify r squared. So by taking the right hand side, the square root, you can actually find r, right? Okay, the radius. So that's a very easy problem. A little bit more complicated problem is that you are given something about the circle. You are given 2 points on the circle, right? Okay, what are those 2 points? 2 2, right, and 12 2, right? Okay, so how do you find, so in order to get the equation, so they're asking for the equation. So the equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, right? Okay, and then what you do is you want to find the center coordinates h and k. So how do you find the center coordinate? You can put the midpoint formula for these 2 points, and then you get exactly the center coordinate, or you can just take the average of these two coordinates. That's the same as midpoint formula, and then you can find the center coordinate. But you also need to find the radius, and how do you do that? You use the distance formula for 2 2 and 12 2. Remember the distance formula, right? X2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus, you need to memorize these formulas, right? Okay, and if you do that, you can find the distance between these 2 points and take half of the distance, you get the radius. Okay, all right, so now from question 11, we are actually doing solving quadratic equation. So this one by factoring, so this one is actually 16x squared is the same as 4x squared minus 1. You can easily factor this as a difference of two squares, 4x plus 1 and 4x minus 1, and set it equal to 0, and then each of these have to be equal to 0. What about this? Well, this is a straightforward factoring once again, except that now you take because the leading coefficient is 1, so it is very easy. Just take 25 and two factors of 25 which add up to 10. And then so those factors which add up to 10, you can easily find those factors and you can get the answer. This will be a little bit more complicated, right? So let me try to do a similar problem to that, right? So that you will. So I'm going to do a similar problem because this is a very important kind of question, because notice that the leading term is not 1, it's actually negative 1. So let me do a similar problem. So here also I need to factor this and solve. So if it is factoring, if I tell you to factor, you have to factor. If you use the quadratic formula or compute in the square, you get 0 credit. So remember that. If I say you must factor, you must factor. Okay, so how do you do this? So when you have the leading coefficient is not 1, you multiply the first one and the last one. Okay, so 2 and negative 5, you get negative 10. You find two factors of negative 10 which add up to the middle term, which is negative 3. Well, you can see that negative 10 has two factors, negative 5 and 2, and they add up to negative 3. So then what you do is you break the middle term into two pieces. So negative 3 can now be broken up into negative 5x plus 2x. So that's what I've done here, negative 5x plus 2x. Then you pair them off. So I take this pair and this pair. So from the first two terms, the first pair, you can take out an x, right? Only from the first two, you took out an x and you're left with 2x minus 5, okay? And then from what can you take out from the last two? Well, it looks as if there are no common factor, but remember there is always one. One is always a common factor. So take out one. And take out one, you get 2x, right? And then you take out one from negative 5, you get negative 5. So now if you look at these two, now you have two terms, but there's a common factor here, 2x minus 5. So take that out. So when you take that out, from the first you get an x, and from the second you get a 1. So you get x plus 1 times 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. So after that is very easy. Either x plus 1 is 0, so you get x equals negative 1, or 2x minus 5 is 0, so you get x equals 5 half. So that is a very important technique, because this is college algebra, so we want to do equations which are slightly complicated than what we would do in intermediate algebra. So this, remember, so that's how you do this type of problem. So 14 is also like that, right? Okay, and this one is a square root rule, right? So I can do a similar problem, right? So similar problem, if I do and say solve 9 say 16x squared equals 81 or something. First of all, solve for x squared. You get x squared equals 81 or 61, 81 over 16. Remember, there is no x term. There's only an x squared term, right? And a constant. Only then you can use the square root rule. So you solve for x squared, but now you can x is equal to plus or minus the square root. Or remember to put the plus or minus. It's super important. If you lose, you will lose a lot of credit if you don't put the plus or minus here. It's a very common mistake. 81 over 16. So the plus or minus, what is the square root of 81? That will be 9. What is the square root of 16? That will be 4. So plus or minus 4 would be the answer for a similar problem like that. So now you can do this problem. Okay, so now again, this is also like that, but now you take this whole quantity and write it as a plus or minus the square root of the right hand side. Okay, and then you solve each of those plus, both the plus, you solve the plus equal to the plus whatever, and then the other one is you solve the minus whatever. Okay, and then you solve for x, right? Okay, and then you get the answer. So again, this is similar to that, right? So all these problems are the similar, right? Okay, now you need to complete the square. Then so that's the third technique that we learned about solving quadratics, and then what you do is you this one. So I'll do a similar problem, right? Okay, for that one, right? Okay, and completing solving the quadratic equation, the third way of solving the quadratic equation, right? Okay, we did the factoring, we did the square root rule, and now we are doing the completing of the square. So if you see an exam, in the exam completing the square, you have to use the completing of the square, right? Okay, and the way to do that, first of all, in all the other cases, you see when you do the factoring, by the way, you keep everything onto the left hand side, but when you're completing the square, it's good if you just take the constant to the right hand side. So let me do a similar problem, right? Similar problem, right? This is similar problem. Okay, not the problem I want you to do the practice exam problem. So now what happens is you get x squared I want to solve x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. So I take the constant over this side, okay, and now x squared plus 2x. So now what I do is I go to the middle term. Now watch the steps. I take the middle term. I divide the middle term by 2, divide it by 2, and you get 1. And then I square that. So this is squaring whatever that I get here. So 1 squared is 1. Now that one that you get after squaring half the middle term, you add to both sides. So I have x squared plus 2x, and I added a 1, and then 8 plus 1, I also added a 1 here. So now the next step is to remember that the left hand side is actually a square, a total square is equal, and the square of that is equal to 9. So what is inside the square is actually x plus 1, right? Okay, and how do you get the x plus 1? Well, you put the placeholders, right? Okay, and the way to put the placeholders is that, not I should not put a like a sign here. Okay, I'll tell you how to get the sign. Okay, so all right, so the first term of the square, the placeholder is the first term here. So the first term is x, then this is x. Whatever the sign that is here goes as the sign, so x plus. And the second term is half this middle term. So half of 2 is 1. That's how you fill the placeholder. So you get x plus 1 squared is equal to 9. Now you can use the square root rule. So this quantity is equal to what? If you use the square root rule onto the right hand side, plus or minus 3. So you get two equations, plus 3 and minus 3. Solve them both and you get the answer. All right, and that's how you do 19. Well, different problem, 20. Right, okay, and now finally we get to the next way of solving the quadratic equations, and that is to use the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, remember, that's another formula you need to memorize for the exam, right? So negative b squared minus 4ac over 2a, right? Okay, and what you do is you identify the thing. So let me do a similar problem, right? Okay, for this one, right? Okay, so I am going to do a similar problem, right? Like the one that we have here, trying to use the quadratic formula. So using the quadratic formula, suppose you want to find x squared plus 7x plus 0 plus 4 is equal to 0. So the first thing to do would be identify the point. So a would be just 1, b would be 7, c would be 4. Okay, and then you guys go up here and you just plug that in. Okay, so negative b is negative 7 plus or minus b squared will be 7 squared minus 4 times a is 1, c is 4. So over 2 times a is, which is 2, right? Okay. So negative 7 plus or minus 49 minus 16 over 2, and 49 minus 16 is 33 over 2. So, and then you solve that, and then that is your answer. So that's how you do this problem. Now remember, this is may not be the answer, because here now you need to simplify the radical. In this case, of course, you look for see whether you can factor out a number which a common square root. So what are those common square root? Like 4 and 9 and 16. Well, you cannot factor out anything there, so it's okay to leave it here, right? But on the other hand, if you see something like square root 48, something like that, right, then you know that it can be written as 16 times 3. You have to write it as 16 times 3, factor out the 16 and write it as 4 square root 3. But here you can't do much. Okay, so and then when you, if you're canceling out, the other important to remember, here there's nothing to cancel out, but if you cancel out things, you must make sure that you divide both the terms with the denominator, not just one term. Okay, that's a very common mistake that people do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video right now, and so we are done up to, so basically you can do up to number 22, and then complex numbers, and the whatever after that, I'll try to see whether I can actually. So for the example, this is a quadratic formula problem, but you will have complex solutions. So you need to simplify the square root in order that you can get complex solutions. Okay, and then the rest I'll try to get another video out, right, where I try to attempt the rest of the testing. I'll try my best. Okay, all right, but right now I'm going to stop, and good luck. So I hope you will follow this questions. So you know pretty much now how to, well, everything you know. So I will just continue and doing the practice problem sheet. Okay, and make sure that you work on, this is only sample. You need to work on the homework problems if you want to get additional practice. Okay, all right, that's it for now. Thank you for watching.